All right, so Kevin McCarthy finally made it. He is House Speaker. I guess he's now legitimately in the Speaker's office that he moved into before he actually had that position. And the question is, how has this all turned out? I think it's an interesting exercise to do a little bit of a postmortem on, an exercise in the language of power. Now, there are some people who as soon as Kevin McCarthy got the votes, threw up their hands and basically said, that's it. A swamp creature is now in place, running the Republican House. My gosh, we have McConnell in the Senate. We have Ronna McDaniel still in the heading the RNC. This is very bad news. We, the Republican base, are not even really represented by these people, so this is an unmitigated disaster. I want to argue that this is not, in fact, the case. Now, for a while there, you had these 20 holdouts, led by, there was Bob Perry, Mary Miller, who's been on the podcast, of course, Matt Gaetz, Lauren Boebert, and the phalanx of 20 were almost like the Spartans at the pass. They were holding out, they were holding firm, they were sort of bent down with their shields above their heads, and they seemed immovable. Vote after vote after vote, I think for 10 straight votes or so, McCarthy didn't seem to be making any progress at all. And then you had something very interesting, which is it looked like McCarthy really upped the concessions that he was making to this group. In other words, both the substantive concessions, things like I'm going to have this investigation and a COVID investigation, the origins of COVID, and I'm going to do a investigation of the border policies, and I'm going to defund the 87,000 IRS agents. And also procedural concessions. I'll give in on rules. I'll give in on the number of House members who are needed in order to call a kind of vote of no confidence or a vote for support or non-support of the Speaker. So McCarthy was basically giving away the store left and right, and in a sense weakening his own future House speakership. Now, all of this, I think, is what caused the Gang of 20, if you will, to finally bend and finally relent. A couple of people were still holdouts, and there were a few people who ended up voting present. But even by voting present, they were facilitating, in the end, the McCarthy speakership. Now, again, it seems on the face of it that this is a loss, because it seems like, wow, the holdouts kind of threw in the towel, they conceded. And let's remember that the 20 holdouts, you had a kind of an irony here, which is the holdouts, these 20 guys, in a sense, more accurately represented the values and the convictions of the base of the Republican voters than the 200 or so Republicans who were committed to McCarthy. For the 200 or so Republicans, it was mainly transactional. Many of those guys, I mean, there are probably a few, maybe Dan Crenshaw, who really like McCarthy, who think he's amazing. But the vast majority of Republicans are like, and we know a few we've spoken to personally, and they want to be on certain committees. Hey, I want to be on this committee. I want to be on Ways and Means. I want to be on Judiciary. And so they don't want to antagonize McCarthy because they want McCarthy to give them appointments. So a lot of it was driven by that. But look, let's look at the deal that emerged at the end. I mean, if you listen to Kevin McCarthy now, he almost seems like a different person than he was before this vote. And I also noticed that his tone is very chastened in the sense that he's not taking the view that, hey, listen, I'm going to teach the rebels a lesson. I mean, obviously, there's probably going to be some private resentment at the fact that they held things up for so long. They did such effective blocking of his speakership. But on the other hand, I think he understands that in order to be effective as Speaker, he actually needs the overwhelming number of Republican House members to be along with him. And so there's been a lot of talk, and coming, by the way, not just from McCarthy, but also from others, even Crenshaw, going on the radio shows and TV shows and basically saying, hey, listen, you know, we are going to heal this divide. We're going to bridge these differences. I think I saw Abigail Sparberger saying something to the effect of, hey, these 20 holdouts, they had a lot of good points, and it was very important for us to hear them and accommodate them and make the concessions. So in other words, I think there is the sense in the House that this has been a win-win situation kind of for everybody. Now look, in the ideal world, would I want Kevin McCarthy? No, he's not my ideal candidate. I still think he's a frat boy. I still think he's a dud in some respects. But the point is, we don't live in the ideal world. This is not the best possible outcome, but I would argue it's the best practical outcome. If Kevin McCarthy had gone down, and he would have gone down had the 20 just held and get anyone but McCarthy, never McCarthy. But then you'd get Steve Scalise, who's a lot like McCarthy, and Steve Scalise wouldn't have to make the same concessions that McCarthy ended up making. Obviously, I'd like to see someone like Jim Jordan as Speaker, but Jim Jordan flatly refused. He would not put his hat in the ring. And so, as a practical matter, it wasn't going to be Jim Jordan. And so given the options that were available, that we're choosing from, I think we actually came out of this one all right.